Hello, everybody. This is the Dead Money Podcast. I am still the host, Dan Arfin. No one's been applying to take the position, so I'm still here. I got a story to tell from last week, but before I do, I realized that at this point I have been threatened either dead or something else so many times at a poker table that it shouldn't even really faze me at this point. Now, the last time it happened, it was by a woman when I was playing a little 1-3 at Resorts World. I talked about this a couple months ago in a previous episode. She was drunk and had too much lip filler and was talking about how she used to be in the Air Force and would use Krav Maga, presumably on me. And this was all because I told her to shut up after she not only made a completely unprovoked, unnecessary, and obnoxiously demeaning comment about how much I tipped the dealer after stacking her, but also getting the amount I tipped wrong. I tipped 3 unique dollars with chips spaced out like good old-fashioned flying saucers. But she managed to only see one unique chip, even though all 3 of the chips were right in front of her face to see. Now, I suppose her lips could have been impeding her vision, but if not, I guess it's kind of ironic now that I think about it, because given her inebriation, you'd think that would have caused her to incorrectly see more of whatever physical object she was looking at, in this case, poker chips, instead of less. But it didn't. She's the only woman to have ever threatened me at a poker game. Most of the women I play with just give me head. I mean a quiet, cold shoulder. But what are you going to do? It's 1-3. So anyway, here's what happened this time. I had just switched tables, and within the first couple of orbits, not much had happened. But then comes a hand where the under the gun straddled, and there was 1 or 2 limps, including the big blind. And then the straddle made it 60. Folds back to the big blind, who looked to be a fish, and he calls the 60, except when he called the 60, he didn't call the 60. He accidentally limp raised to, I think, 130 because he threw out the wrong color chips. He accidentally picked up a black chip. Now, he immediately declared this was an accident and he just meant to call. And the dealer, in a most refreshing manner, immediately took charge. He didn't sit there all dead. He promptly told the straddler who'd raised to not choose any action yet and that he'll get the floor to make a ruling. So a woman comes over, someone I've never seen before, so we know she's been brought on just for the WSOP, and without much hesitation, after hearing the details, she ruled that the accidental raise was going to stand as a raise. Now, as far as that goes, I mean, you could probably go either way. You know, if she wanted to use some lenient discretion and give some leeway to the guy who fucked up, I mean, I don't see why you couldn't make a case for that. But at the same time, if she wants to throw the book at him, then that's fine too. Because his limp raise was not to some overly massive size. In fact, there's, I don't know if it's like a rule or just like a prerogative at the win. Whatever it is, if someone bets an obscene amount of money relative to the pot and claims it was an accident, the floor will allow them to revise their bet. So, for example, if it folds to you in the hijack and you want to raise to $15, but you accidentally make it $300, you will not be forced to raise to $300 because of, I don't know, because of how out of character that raise is compared to what else has gone on in this hand. But this limp raise from the big blind was not anywhere close to that extreme. I mean, all he did was go a little over a min raise. So the possibility of him angling here isn't out of the question, but I can understand why the floor ruled this way. So the floor didn't fuck up, the player fucked up. So with the betting now reopened, the guy who made it 60, who was just a young Asian guy, he looked like a WSOP reg, he does what you have to do in this situation. It just is what it is, and that's 4-bet. And he 4-bet jammed. It was probably in the neighborhood of a good $1,100. So that sucks for the big blind, but hey, he did this to himself. But as he was thinking, first he said, "That's not nice. I almost should call you out of spite." And he's like, "I really want to." I mean, normally I wouldn't, but because of the situation, I might. Now, he ultimately folded like we all would have expected, but then he says to the guy, "What goes around comes around." Wow. Now, all this time, watching this unfold, I hadn't said a word yet. And if you listen to this podcast, then you've heard me say over and over how every time I get into it with somebody, that it always starts with someone instigating with me. I never have to say anything to anyone to start an argument. Somehow, some way, it's always the other person provoking me, like Lip Filler did with the tipping. Now, it's true, oftentimes I'll engage it. And no, I don't have to, but why not engage it? We're playing poker here. I'm already in a war-minded, fuck you state of being, so if you decide to be provocative by running your stupid, self-righteous mouth at me on top of it, well then sure thing, Tootsie, let's battle that way too. So this time I wasn't instigated with. I decided to be the instigator. None of what I said to this guy was necessary, but I didn't care. Because he just crossed the line into being a total crybaby by saying what he said. He just patronized the shit out of another player for, in a most common sensible manner, taking advantage of his incompetence. People, exploiting stupidity is exactly what poker is meant to be about all day, every day. It is a war, and everyone who plays needs to realize a lot of people will think of it that way, especially when they are playing in a Las Vegas cash game during the World Series of Poker! I mean, holy shit! I know that this particular exploit was over something technical rather than the game itself, but so what? What the fuck was the straddler supposed to do after this guy accidentally limp raises him to $130? Just tell him, okay, if you didn't mean to do that, then I'll just do exactly whatever you want? Please. So I said to the guy, since he characterized his opponent's 4-bet shove as not nice, I said, he doesn't owe it to you to be nice. Then he said, I didn't say he owed it to me to be nice, I just said that it wasn't nice. And then I said, well, you did say right after that what goes around comes around, so it kind of sounds like you were suggesting that he did owe that to you. And by kind of, I meant 100%, so I actually should have been a little bit more forthcoming. But either way, I mean, do you believe this? It reminds me of this time at Resorts World a few years ago, that a player got mad at me because I didn't want to chop the blinds. It was a 2-5 game. Then he said a few hands later, after I lost a pot to somebody, I mean, it wasn't even that big of a pot, but it was whatever, it was a pot. Then he said, that was karma. Right. How dare I come all the way to the casino and the poker room to do the thing I came here for, instead of just always placate to whatever is of more interest to my opponent. Whatever was I thinking? I mean, I've said to people that if I wanted to chop, I can just stay home. You know, I don't have to come all the way here just to split. But look, if this accidental limp raise occurred at a home game that you were lucky enough to be invited to with a bunch of whales, then yeah, I mean, in that situation, I'd rather just cut the guy some slack. But a 2-5 cash game at the Wynn in Las Vegas, yeah, try again. So it amazes me. I mean, it really does. This guy thought that the moral of the story in this situation was not just pay a little fucking attention to how much money you're betting. No, the moral of the story was, my opponent should do me a favor when I'm too spaced out to even realize how much money I'm betting. But here's the thing. His whole point was, his opponent's action to 4-bet shove was not nice, indicating that if he either did just call the 130 or allowed him to not limp raise and just leave it as a call of 60 like he claimed his intentions were, that this would have been nice. Well, look, everyone is entitled to their opinion, but had the straddler done that, I wouldn't consider that nice. I would just think of that as being a pushover and stupid. And when the straddler jammed and eventually took the pot, he said to him in a total impersonal manner. He's like, I have to do that. And yes, he does. Variance occurs in so many ways, and you just have to take whatever the game gives you from time to time. So then, moments after this, it folds to me in middle position. I got 9-8 suited. I raised to 20. And Mr. Expert on what goes around comes around 3-bets me only to 50. And he also did his 3-bet with the right color chips this time. He did that simultaneously after I finished raising to 20. So when my 4 red chips hit the felt, they were in unison with his 2 green quarter chips being lightly slammed on the felt. So it folds back to me. And this is the type of spot where I always fold to a 3-better who has position on me because the size is usually at least 3 times my open. The 3-betting ranges are nitty, but he only went 2.5x since he only made it 50. So this was like just small enough for me to think, okay, to hell with it. Plus, he was deep anyway and probably feeling a unique type of tilt given that he didn't get to see the flop in that other hand. He lost more money in the process of doing so. And worst of all, he wasn't treated nicely after he blatantly fucked up. So as the flop was being dealt, I said to him, okay, I said, I want to be nice. So you just tell me whatever action it is you want me to take in this hand, and I'll do it. So the table's laughing a little bit at this, and the flop comes King 6-3, 2 hearts, 1 spade. I don't know what suit I said before that I had, but I had spade, so I didn't get too much here. And he promptly bets 3/4 of the pot, going 75. And normally I don't like to waste time bullshitting with my opponent after my mind has been made up, but this time I felt like I kind of had to. So I paused for a couple seconds, and I looked at him and I said, okay, so what do you want me to do? He's like, I don't know. He's like, I just want to play a big pot. Then I folded. Then a hand or two later, he's in a pot with someone else, and I think he was in the 5 seat. Yeah, he was in the 5 seat. I was in the 2 seat. But I was telling my neighbor in the 1 seat on my right, since he at least knows I do this podcast, I told him, this is why I have a podcast. It's so that I can tell stories like this. So then shortly after that, Crybaby gets into a hand with the guy who had exploited his error. I didn't really pay attention to the action. What else is new? But I think the board was ace, deuce, 6-4 with a flush draw. And Crybaby check raised big, all in on the turn. And he evidently had a set of 6s and was called by aces and 4s understandably, and he doubled up on the river. Then he immediately points to me after that happened. And I think someone else said, hey, what goes around comes around. And then I said, laughing, I was like, yeah, that could not have been a coincidence. Which is kind of like my default line I like to go to whenever someone cites something extremely short-sighted, just some made-up fanciful logic as to why a certain player, probably themselves, just won a big pot. Now, it wasn't because poker is just random and every hand is independent and this time they just ran good. No, this was purely manifested by their pea-brained senselessness. So after I tell him that couldn't have been a coincidence, then he says to me, he's like, you don't know who I am, bro. Which obviously is of a threatening connotation and is why it's probably a good idea to not engage in any confrontations with people whenever you can, and especially don't egg them on like I was doing, because he's right. I don't know who he is. So if I turn up dead or maimed in the next few days, you might want to roll back the camera to Thursday, June 5th, table 12 at the Wynn Poker Room at about, 4 p.m., and take a good look at the face of the nice guy expert in seat 5. Now, as I've said, I've been threatened at a table a bunch of times over the years, and sometimes with death. Well, so far, nothing has happened. And that's not overly shocking, because you would think if someone did want to do something crazy, they probably wouldn't advertise it in any sort of way. They would just do it. But right now, we're dealing with a guy who just won a lot of money, but his ego is still hurting a little bit, because here's me, this smart-ass New York Jew, whose physical stature is not particularly imposing, continuously making him look stupid every time he thinks he's landed a special zinger. And I'll take the Pepsi challenge with anybody. I know how to really piss someone off once I've decided they deserve it. And it's usually because they're acting like a self-righteous child. So then a moment later he's like, so you do a podcast about poker? Which was unexpected because when I mentioned my podcast earlier, like I said, I was only telling it to my neighbor. I didn't want anyone else to hear me, and certainly didn't think anyone did, but obviously he did. And that just makes me wonder how many other times in life has something like this happened. So I said to him, yeah. He's like, oh yeah, you do a podcast about your 2-5 game? How many followers do you have? And I just very casually said, I was like, 2? Maybe 2.5? He says, 1,000? I said, no. 2, like the whole number. He's like, how do you have 2.5 followers? What are they, Siamese twins? I said, I don't know. I have no way of knowing who my followers actually are. So then we get into another hand. I raised to 20 with ace-8 of hearts, and he 3-bets to 40. Gets back to me, and, it's definitely good to just 4-bet, but being out of position, unless I 4-bet to something nuclear, I mean, we know he's not going to fold. And now I'm just going to be out of position with this hand that's going to be not so wonderful with to navigate post-flop. So I decided I'd rather just play a small 3-bet pot out of position with him as the current aggressor than a big 4-bet pot out of position as me as the current aggressor. The flop comes king, queen, 6, rainbow. I check. He checks right back. Turn is the 9 of hearts, so now I got the flush draw. I think for a second. I pot it going 80, and he folds right away. Now, before this hand happened, I had been telling myself that if I bluff this guy, I'm going to show it. And especially since throughout all of this, I'd been pretty card dead and had mostly just been watching. But what the fuck? I mean, this was an $80 pot that had no money go into it post-flop besides the bet he folded to. And it has always tilted the shit out of me when people show some stupid tiny bluff that they got away with in a small pot, acting like they just fought off a pit bull with their bare hands and are this ultimate badass. And they're genuinely thinking, oh, this is going to get me paid now in your $4,000 pot. Right. So I didn't want to act like that, so I just mucked. But then he says, oh, he's like, that's what the pros do. He's like, pause for 3 seconds when you got a big hand and then pick up your chips. That's what all the pros do. You're going to talk about that on your 2-5 poker podcast? And I was just laughing. I felt like I got what I wanted from the comments I'd already made. So at this point, I just decided I was finished with this. Because if you do go on and on and on, it eventually sort of has like a diminishing return. So I just like to speak my piece sharply, succinctly, and then that's it. But he couldn't contain himself. Because a few seconds after that, then he added, he's like, yeah, I thought you'd have nothing to say to that. And I just laughed some more. Yeah. He really shut me up there. Darn. People definitely get extra anxious when they think they're trying to get you with the battle of the wits, but you're just getting the better of them. I mean, it's not like what was happening to him has never happened to me before. It would have been really funny, though, if this podcast did have, like, a ton of followers. I mean, I've only been at this for a few months, and it's not as if I ever expect to have a lot of followers one day, but either way, it's always going to be pretty easy to assume that some random podcaster doesn't have the whole world listening. And now he's, like, trying to, like, make fun of me for that, like we're in fucking 6th grade. It's like, where's your podcast, right? How many times have I said it? You cannot hide who you are at poker. People cannot hide it. I mean, I don't know how many of them realize that going into it. Probably none of them. I mean, I certainly didn't realize it, but it will bring out the absolute worst in you. And I don't care when it comes out of me, because sometimes it's just more important to me that someone puts these people in their place when they start getting vomitous about how no one held their hand through each Space Cadet fuck-up they made, such as not knowing what color chips they just willy-nilly threw into the pot. Sometimes it's just more important that I tell somebody what it is than just sit there quietly twiddling my thumbs. So then I just shut up for a while. Like I said, I was happy enough with all this. Then I saw him run a sick bluff. I couldn't believe this. There was an early position raised to 25. Folds to him, and let's just call him Karma from now on. Karma calls in the small blind, and the big blind calls. And the big blind was the guy who had doubled up Karma, after what went around came around. The flop came Queen, 9, 6, 2 spades. Karma donked the min bet, $5 into 75. The big blind raised to 25. The open raiser folded, and Karma now 3-bet the flop to 50. Big blind calls. Curious to see where this goes. Turn was another 6, no spade. And now Karma min bets again. He bets $5 into $175. And the big blind calls. And the river was an offsuit ace. And Karma bets $5 into $185. The big blind calls. And Karma said jack high. He had jack 7 of spades and missed his flush. So on this river, he bet 2.7% of the pot as a bluff. Not 2.7x, 2.7% with jack high. Well, I guess that's one way to try to level someone. I mean, I know sometimes people bet really tiny to induce a raise and then re-raise, but that's always for value. I think one of the only times I ever saw it done as a bluff is we saw Nick Airball do that to Jungle Man successfully in the last year or two on one of the Lodge streams, I think it was. But I don't know. I somehow doubt that this this is what Karma was attempting here. But either way, a good try. You only have to get a better hand to fold to this about 1 out of 37 or 38 times. And when you're facing a $5 min bet on this river, well, I guess it probably would take some major nerves of steel to just call that all day long. So Karma probably just got unlucky. His bluff didn't work. Anyway, so then I think 1 or 2 players limp, and this shitty knit fishy player who'd been bleeding off his chips, he raises to 20. I finally get to play a hand, and I make it 85 from the small blind with ace-jack of spades, and he calls. But he threw out 65 at first because I think that's what he heard the dealer say, so he may not have called 85, but once she confirmed it was 85 and not 65, then of course he's going to call the rest. Flop was something like 6-3-5 rainbow with 1 spade. I bet 90 and he calls. Turn is a beautiful card. It's the king of spades. Now I got the nut flush draw. So I jam his stack in. It's a little over 500 into, I guess, like 360. He calls pretty fast. I brick. I show. And he has king jack of diamonds. Jeez. He flopped the same amount of hope as I did, 2 overs and a backdoor flush draw. And he hits this wonderful 3-outer on the turn, and then he fades my redraw. But then Karma told him, he's like, nice hand, buddy. Felt like a needle, but I ignored it. I played one more hand with Karma. He had straddled. It folded to my button. I made it 35 with jack 8 suited. He defended his straddle, and the flop was, I think it was like ace 9-4 rainbow, I think. I had the backdoor straight and flush draw. He check calls 35. Turn was a blank for me, but it was another 9. He checks. And I thought about this for a little while, and I checked back. River was a 10. He thought, and then he almost bet. He reached for chips and changed his mind, and then checked. And then I thought for a little while, too, because I really didn't care if this guy beat me in a pot catching me bluffing or not. I'm just trying to make a good decision. I mean, he saw me lose with the ace-jack suited hand, so, he was really trolling me earlier for being a nit, but he should at least consider now maybe that's not entirely true. But with him taking this whole line and being really loose pre, then all right, I'll bite. So I just bet 2 times the pot. I bet 260. Doesn't really make a lot of sense, but a lot of lines like this do get a lot of folds in the 2-5 pool. And he thinks a little bit, and he shows an ace, and he folds. And once again, I resisted the temptation to show the bluff because once again, I thought this was too pussy of a pot to show a bluff. I'm waiting for the big one, the really, really big one. When I jam or something dramatic like that. I mean, this was only a single raised pot, which had one bet go in it post-flop. And it was a straddle pot, which makes the pot even smaller in that sense. So I just didn't think it was worth it. But in hindsight, I wish I did. Because if it incensed him any further at all, then it's worth it. Because, he would have said something like, oh, you're going to put that in your 2-5 podcast? So I missed it. Oh, well. I wanted to keep playing with him there, but there were like 4 women waiting for me to have dinner with them, so I had to get going. And when I racked up, he did say, like, nice playing with you, buddy, or brother. That's what he said. He said, nice playing with you, brother. Good luck with the podcast. And it actually sounded sincere, so I said to him, thanks. I'm like, you want to be a guest on it? And he's like, oh, yeah. So I don't know. I guess maybe I earned enough of his respect at the end by not continuing to pour on the criticisms of what was childlike behavior, that he felt like he could say something kind at the end. Or maybe he just felt like he scared me when he told me I didn't know who he was. I mean, he was just this tall guy. He had some kind of, maybe a slight European tilt. I mean, I'm not sure. I thought he might have been Canadian. I don't know. But either way, all's well that ended well enough. Even though no one was really nice to each other in any of the pots anyone played, nobody got hurt. Everyone's a winner. Everyone got a trophy. We'll see you next time.